managing secrets. Huh. So what are secrets? There's stuff that we need to have on our websites in order to usually interact with other systems. So, secrets are things that probably shouldn't be used outside the production environment. So these are like API keys, or if you're sending email through, an authenticated email server, the SMTP username and password, or tokens for, however you authenticate with, third-party services or whatever. So yeah, we don't really want to share these things widely, because if they get out into the wrong hands, it could be that this API key will grant access to private data. So say like you were integrated with a CRM or something, the API key would be able to get your customer data. And as a side note, when you set up these keys or tokens, sometimes these services allow you to limit the permissions. So that's probably a good idea. I know like with GitHub and Bitbucket and stuff, when you generate tokens, you can say it only has access to do these things. So if you can limit the access that these tokens use, it helps a lot with keeping things secure. If you use the same token between like production and dev and stage environments, it's possible that, if these are going to production environments in the other services, you're going to get bad data in there. People are just, testing things out, seeing how they work and respond. So, the big thing would be like Google Analytics, right? If you have that installed and configured on all your sites, including local, you might be getting analytics data that includes the developer refreshing the page 500 times. And that kind of skews your results or whatever, depending on how you have, your Google Analytics configured. Or you could be submitting a form that sends it off to your CRM system, and oops, we've got 500 Joe test users that our call center is trying to call. So yeah, and then of course, you have the risk of blocking out your APIs. So, some services, a lot of services will revoke your key or token if it detects unusual activity or gets misused or whatever. So either somebody abuses the service, or even if it's just testing, you're like, can this service handle taking 500 requests a second? And you try to run it through. You kind of don't want to break that token on the production site. So yeah, let's separate that out so it doesn't affect production. If you break something, it's only, your dev environment. So where should we store these secrets? Yeah, by default, most, just like any other configuration, a lot of these integration modules will store it in the database, just like any other piece of configuration. Oh yeah, so here's like 4 different places where you can kind of put them. And there's probably a 5th one too that I didn't quite get to. So yeah, you can have it in your database, just like any other configuration. You can put it in your code base, in your Git repo. You could include it, as part of a, PHP include on some random file that's not in your Git repo, that's just out on the server. Or you can use what's called environment variables, which get set up with whatever environment your site is running in. So yeah, secrets in the database. As I said before, modules tend to do their configuration like this, straight up. It's probably, it can be okay if it isn't too big of a deal. If that, secret gets out, I mean, if you have, if you don't have the bandwidth to set up any of the other ways to do stuff and just have your small sites, analytics key on the database, that's probably fine. But if it's like a key for that has, grants access to sensitive data, you're going to want to do something else, right? It's very easy to change these values on the fly. So if for some reason you need to change your keys, you just log into the site and copy, paste, and done. But on the other hand, it's very easy to mess that up. If you accidentally hit the wrong, the wrong form or paste it in wrong or whatever, then, you can easily, if somebody got misconfigured, they can go in and change the key. So yeah. As for, yeah, it can be difficult to manage different values between environments. So we'll get into that a little bit here, but knowing what value is on what environment, dev stage or production, you have to, log into the site or look at the database to see what it's actually using. And, yeah, you don't know. It's not really coded very well. So it can change at any point, depending on what environment, what database you're even using. And also, you can clone it down. If you're working locally and you take a database from live, you're going to end up with those live tokens, those secrets on your local, and we probably don't want that either. So yeah, this is kind of the most risky way of storing secrets. Again, you kind of have to evaluate your own risk here. Risk to reward or risk to ease, I guess, trade-off here. But yeah, the key is stored in lots of places. You got database backups. You got, access issues that can change the keys. And, there's a lot of places where you could find the key. And of course, SQL injection might be able to expose that stuff. So if you have a vulnerability like that, I haven't heard much about SQL injection lately. I think people have gotten the memo about that mostly, but it does happen from time to time. And I think there's some modules out there that will enable you to encrypt the values in the database. So this might be useful for something like if you have OAuth tokens or whatever for users on your website, individual users. So, each user has a token in order for your application to authenticate with Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And you're doing that on like a per person basis. You're going to need to have that token stored in the database somewhere because you can't really statically assign that value. So there are modules out there. I haven't used one. I think someone on the call here might have used one before that encrypts the value, and then the key to decrypt it is the one secret you have to keep. So databases. So we might think, okay, we can put this stuff in the code, straight in the code base. That's pretty easy to implement. You can just add it as a variable in your settings.php or in a module, or Even with the configuration management system, you can do it with the YAML files, the configuration YAML files. And even with things like config split, you can change those values based on what environment you're in. And it's easy to set it up based on if statements. So you can say, if the host URL is this, then the key is this. If the host URL is dev dot whatever, then the key is this. However, doing it this way requires, if you need to change or update the token, it requires a whole new code deployment, right? And depending on, you know, what your process is for that, it might not be a quick way to resolve that issue if you have to go through QA and testing and all that stuff just to change the value of one variable. Or, you know, the other way is you can just edit the code straight on the live server. That's always scary, right? And then again, you know, anyone with access to the repository has the keys. So especially if you're sharing the repository with vendors or contractors or whoever to help you out, they will be able to see the keys if you store it in the Git repository. Sometimes they need it, sometimes they don't. That's something you kind of have to evaluate as the need is there. So yeah, a note on the YAML files. It's pretty easy to accidentally commit these if you are doing the config export thing and adding it to the repo. So that's kind of like a little watch out for that, because that happens sometimes. And then you end up with your secrets in the Git repository, and then you have to go back and rewrite Git history and mess up the whole development flow for all the branches and forks and everything that you have out there. So yeah, that's kind of what happens when you do secrets in the code base. Secrets in an include. It can be, yeah, the idea is pretty simple. What you would do is in settings.php or whatever, you would include a file that's outside of the repository that's sitting on the server. So here, you know, the example here says to include, you know, this webvars.php file from the server's etc directory. And then this file here contains hard-coded stuff. So this keeps it out of the repository, keeps it out of the database, but it requires access to the server to change. So depending on how things are set up, whether or not, you know, your developers or everyone has access to the server, whoever has access to the server can change that. Or it may be restricted to the infrastructure team who needs, you know, some reason to go in there and change it, or maybe they need to, you know, what is their process for making changes on the servers. It's probably not the most portable way to do this. So if you have, you know, if you're trying to use your site with, you know, Lando or Macport or, you know, other container environments or hosting environments, there isn't really a good place to put this that would exist in all the environments. So that would be really hard to manage. Because, you know, that same file would have to exist in all the environments. So that's kind of the hard part of that. But then again, it would be easy to change the files or change the keys based on the environment, because you can have the different include, you know, different values in the include file on different servers and environments. Secrets in an environment variable. So this can get a little complex. Environment variables are a thing in a lot of programming languages and operating systems and whatnot. Many places can manage environment variables. You can set them in a lot of different places. You can set them on the system OS level. You can set them in your web server configuration or in your PHP configuration. Some systems have this .env file configuration. So like on Lando, if you want to add a configuration or an environment variable, you just add the stuff to a .env file and it's there. And then you can exclude that from, put that in your git ignore file so you don't commit that stuff. But then it would have to be built during the build process. So yeah, it's a pretty well-known standard. A lot of, like I said, a lot of different languages and systems use environment variables. And it's kind of considered best practice, or at least good practice, to use environment variables. And of course, cloud services have lots of ways to manage these variables for you. So I know experience with Pantheon, they have this thing called Terminus secrets that works along. It allows you to set store secrets in your private files, and you can use the Terminus command that you can use to manage your websites via command line. You can get it to set and retrieve variables, and then you do some stuff in your settings.php to get that available to your environment variables and everywhere, so that it becomes available. So there's a let's play part where I can kind of walk through a little bit of like how you can override a setting in settings.php, and how an environment variable can be set in settings.php. I can look at the Terminus secrets thing. And then there was, there's also, if you want to go further with environment variables, there are systems out there that are like, they're called key vaults, where you have to, your keys are encrypted all the time. So this is for like super sensitive stuff, right? This is where I'd like to put the key that would grant you access to, sensitive information like personal information or credit cards or all that stuff. Yeah, any questions or comments about what I just went over, or? Does it make sense? Cool. All right, let's see what I have to play with here. How can config be override in settings.php? All right, let's pull this down. All right, I've got a demo website here. So for the sake of playing around, instead of using any like actual tokens or anything like that to try and demo this stuff, since it's pretty much the same to, update the configuration for a token value on some modules, it's pretty much the same for any other configuration, right? So in theory, this works pretty much the same way. So I just chose the site slogan to play around with. But you can imagine this is, the configuration for Google Analytics or something. So here we go, configuration. Pantheon site needs to spin up here. There we go. So here we have the slogan's empty, but we have the slogan sitting there. So where is that coming from? So I can pull up, let's see here. Oops. Where's that? Okay, can we see the code in here? Whoa, too big. That's probably a good size. Readable? Yes, no, good, all right. So this is the settings.php file for this site. In here, we have set the value for the slogan in the settings.php. So if you want to just hard code your thing in there or put it in if statements, you can do that. So how do you find this little system site slogan thing? How do you know what array to put it in? So what I do on the site here is in configuration, you go to configuration synchronization, then you go to export, and then you go to single item. And in here, you can look up any of the configuration stuff. So this kind of mirrors the YAML file output that you get. Most of the time, the stuff is going to be under simple configuration. The rest of these are kind of, what do you call them? Configuration entity things that have multiple instances of configuration. So if it's just a particular one key for your whole site, it's probably going to be under simple configuration. And then under there, you're looking for whatever your module name is, dot settings usually. In this case, we know it's the system site. And you can keep, poking through to see where the value is. And then here we see slogan is in system.site. And we scroll down here and we see system.site. And then the key in there is slogan. So we kind of map that out. So config is system.site, which is the file name, system.site. And then under that, we have the slogan key. And we just drill down. And so like if you're looking for the 404, you'd probably add, page, 404. And you can set that value if it's nested down somewhere. And so great. One thing to make note of is that you can still set, by default, you can still set this configuration. So notice it's empty here. I can put in whatever value. It will save it to the database. If you do an export, config export, it will put it in the YAML file, but it will not actually update the behavior. So anything that goes in your settings.php is going to be the truth, right? But if you're editing a value, a configuration value, it's going to take from what's in the database or what you imported from your YAML file. So that can be a little confusing when you see things that are mismatched like that. So that's something to be aware of. And I think there are some modules out there that help you manage this. If anyone knows the name of the modules off the top of their head, feel free to shout that out. Yeah. What's next? So environment variable. So yeah, we don't want to put it in our code, maybe, right? Is that, so how do we get that in there? So here, being a Pantheon site, you can, or whatever site, you can do a get env. That is a PHP standard to get an environment variable. And then it's usually just a key value pair. So you get, dev my key. And I just created this, and however you want to put this in the environment variables, whether it's in your PHP ini or your web server config or system config or in your Docker config or a .env file, however your setup manages environment variables, you can get that. So so this is what it does. This true here, that argument says only look for local variables. So in PHP, you can have, if like you have, the $_server super global, and then you have like HTTP _ whatever thing about the connection. Those are environment variables, but some of those are actually user submitted data, right? So you can't always trust that. So having this true here excludes all those HTTP things, so you don't accidentally try to get that user submitted environment variable in there somehow. So that's that was an interesting issue a while back when that came about. It's sort of like, back in the day when every variable was registered globals, yeah. And so getting this stuff in for like Pantheon or whatever, I've got this block of code here from Pantheon that says, okay, if you're using the secrets and you want to, set it as an environment variable, you can use this code. So you can see here, it's getting the secrets.json file that the terminus secrets thing holds. And if it's there, go ahead and grab the contents of it. It's a JSON file. And then decode it and loop through it and do put env. So it makes each thing in there its own environment variable, so you can use it as a regular environment variable. So if that's not there, it'll pick up, whatever system environment variables are available, right? So you only have one piece of code that really assigns that value. Yeah. Any questions about how the settings PHP works? Comments? Feel like I'm just kind of rambling here.
I'm fine.
So those environment variables, you can add them, you'd add them through probably the portal or the web browser into Pantheon in the different environments. I'm taking it, right?
I'm not sure if they have a, I'm not sure if they have like a way to do that. I haven't really seen.
Okay. It's
but
funny, I was just in Azure and I noticed that they had an environment variables area. So I wasn't sure if Pantheon has the same thing.
Yeah, it's Pantheon doesn't give you direct access to environment variables from what I can tell, but many hosting providers do. So if you're on Azure or ASW or whatever hosting platform, they usually have some sort of way of setting up environment variables or setting up secrets. I know ASW has like a co-service for managing encrypted tokens, so you can use that service.
So where do
Yeah.
you put the secrets themselves?
So here in Pantheon, there's a couple ways. I can go through that real quick if you want. Fire up a terminal here. So there's a Terminus plugin. So are you familiar with Terminus?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a Terminus secrets plugin that helps you manage this. And there's a GitHub repo for it. And you basically just clone it into your .terminus plugins directory in your home directory. And then it gives you access to this Terminus secrets command. And so you do Terminus secret set site env key value.
Great. Cool.
And what this actually does in the background is it manages the secrets.json file in your private files directory. So there is a plain text file sitting out there. But it isn't checked in anywhere. It's not in the database, so you're pretty good. And that's why we needed to do this little thing to grab the contents of this file, parse out the JSON, and throw them in the environment variable. Yeah, it's a good question. But yeah, other services I've seen, you can just log into the cPanel and type it right in there and you're good to go. So I don't know why Pantheon's like that, but whatevs. They do support encrypted key services. So they have they've partnered with this locker service. And I'm sure there's other modules that integrate with Drupal in order to do encrypted key services too. So if you have a different service, like what other services are there? Trying to remember names of them. Yeah, like HashiCorp has a big one. So these are all like pay services where you get so many key requests or whatever per month, and yeah, it keeps all your secrets and it gives. I'm not exactly sure where that chain of trust comes in to where it allows you to decrypt the keys. I haven't really gotten that far into how that stuff works. But yeah. Yeah, so Pantheon is integrated with this locker product. And so here, where's the Drupal instructions? So you just install the module. The module knows, oh, you're on Pantheon. All I need is your email address. And black box magic stuff happens and you get your keys. So yeah, if you're dealing with some more sensitive information, that's probably something to look into. The different services, or what did I say? The HashiCorp one, I think, has a open source license available. So if you wanted to host your own thing, that might be possible. Maybe I was looking at something else. So yeah. Yeah, open source. So this is their vault, I guess. So you can do a lot of stuff, I guess. But yeah, if you pay for enterprise, stuff, then you can do more collaborative things. You know, you need it replicated across data centers for your Uber global enterprise cloud network, whatever, you know, they've got a plan for you, of course. Yeah.
Plan and appropriately priced.
Oh, of course. If you got money, they can take it. All right, that's pretty much all I have about secrets and stuff. Open for any general questions or chit chat or whatever for the next 15 minutes.
I have a Pantheon question. Have you used Composer on Pantheon? I wouldn't say I've used it on Pantheon, but I've used Composer to build stuff, build what's called an artifact that then gets deployed to Pantheon. So that's kind of like the way they kind of set things up here.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't Pantheon kind of push, what would you call it? Yeah, like artifacts rather than they don't build on the server, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Correct. Yeah, right. I think they're working on a solution that
Oh
does that
yeah,
for you.
I remember that when we were looking at platform, that was one of the distinctions we noticed. And Pantheon said, well, we're working on that. And
Yeah.
that was a year ago or more, maybe a year and a half. Hey, if you're from Pantheon and you're on this call, I'm not throwing any shade. I just remember that that was something that they were working on.
Yeah, so
Oh,
what is it?
I know that one of my other ones I can, you know, I use I use a PC right now. So I use Putty and, you know, to get my window, and then I use because I'm using Composer to upload stuff to my other sites, you know, when I have to up, you know, my D8 sites for,
Mhm.
so it gets the any of the libraries that go with it and supposedly and stuff. So
I think we had used GitHub, I think, and their build pipeline with Pantheon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
I think
they
we had
do.
set up Circle CI and then I thought GitHub was doing its own builds though. I'm pretty sure we started using GitHub Actions to
Oh, yeah,
do.
I think that's a relatively new thing.
Yeah, it was about a year ago.
Yeah.
Most of my knowledge about Drupal ended in June because I went over to this other company and I haven't been on the web since. But apparently some things haven't changed yet.
Yeah, I mean the Circle CI pipeline works just fine. I think that's what a lot of people are using right now. But yeah, if you have GitHub Actions, then yeah, that's probably just gonna kill Circle and Travis and all those things.
It was not, I mean, you know, Circle was good, but I don't know which one's better or anything other than that. Yeah, it's easier to have it all in one
Yeah. So
customer.
like if you want a Bitbucket, you do. I thought it was called Bamboo, but pipelines. But yeah, yeah. So this whole build tools part is kind of,
okay.
yeah. So yeah, yeah, if you get into continuous integration stuff, that's like if you get a Circle CI service to build it for you, or, you know, what I just end up doing for my own personal site, because I didn't want to mess with pipelines and stuff, is I just commit the vendor directory. I mean, that's basically what happens. So, you know, keep your composer lock and all that stuff. It's not best practice to commit the vendor directory and the modules and stuff that are managed by composer, but oh well. I'm not, you know, for my personal side, I don't have time to set all that stuff up. Plus, I'd probably have to pay for Circle CI or something, or every time I do something, it will, you know, the pipeline has changed just a little bit, that it'll break something. Any other Drupal questions or web development questions or things you want to talk about?